Welcome to Mastering Comparable Sales, a systematic approach to accurate property valuation. In this comprehensive training, we'll explore the critical techniques and methodologies that real estate professionals use to determine property values with precision and confidence. Understanding how to properly select and analyze comparable sales is fundamental to your success in real estate valuation, whether you're broker, price opinions, or advising clients on pricing strategies. The foundation of accurate property valuation lies in understanding market behavior. Properties don't exist in isolation. Their values are determined by what buyers are willing to pay for similar properties in similar locations under similar market conditions. This principle, known as the principle of substitution, suggests that a rational buyer will pay no more for a property than the cost of acquiring an equally desirable substitute property. Throughout this presentation, we'll examine how to identify these substitute properties and use them effectively in your valuation analysis. The importance of comparable sales in real estate cannot be overstated. They serve as the primary evidence of market value in the sales comparison approach, which is the most widely used valuation method for residential properties. When you select appropriate comparable sales, you're letting the market speak for itself. You're gathering evidence of what actual buyers have paid for properties similar to your subject property under current market conditions. Think of comparable sales as your market witnesses. Each transaction tells a story about buyer preferences, market demand, and value perceptions at a specific point in time. Learn to understand what the market is telling you. A comparable sale that closed 6 months ago may tell a different story than one that closed last week, especially in rapidly changing markets. Similarly, a property 3 miles away in a different school district may provide less reliable testimony than one in the same neighborhood. The challenge lies in finding that sweet, where comparables are similar enough to be meaningful, yet recent and numerous enough to reflect current market conditions. This balance requires both technical knowledge and professional judgment. You must understand the market dynamics, recognize meaningful differences between properties, and know how to adjust for those differences in your analysis. When we evaluate comparable sales, we're looking for properties that buyers would consider as alternatives to the subject property. This is the principle of substitution at work and is your basis for your CMA. Would a buyer seriously consider both properties? Would they view them as substitutes for each other? These are the questions which must guide our selection process and help us avoid the common mistake of choosing sales based solely on superficial similarities. Now let's talk about Fannie Mae. As the largest purchaser of residential mortgages in the United States, Fannie Mae's guidelines effectively set the industry standard for appraisal practice when it comes to purchase appraisals. It is important to understand these guidelines, as they will greatly impact the appraisal, and the agent must be aware of them. Fannie Mae requires appraisers to use comparable sales that are similar to the subject property in terms of their physical characteristics, legal characteristics, and location. But similarity alone isn't sufficient. The guidelines also emphasize the importance of using recent sales, typically within the past 12 months, though this time frame can be adjusted based on market activity levels. In stable markets with frequent transactions, you might focus on sales from the past 3 to 6 months. In rural markets with limited activity, you may need to extend your search to 18 months or longer. The underlying philosophy of Fannie Mae's requirements centers on reliability and credibility. Every comparable sale you include in your report should strengthen your value conclusion, not raise questions about your judgment. It cannot be overemphasized. Loan underwriters review every appraisal. They're looking for logical, well-supported analyses that use truly comparable properties. They want to see that you've made reasonable efforts to find the best available comparables and that you've explained any necessary compromises. If the appraisal does not meet standards, the appraisal may be sent back to the appraiser for further support of their value. If the comparable sales do not support your sale price, the appraiser isn't going to work to make it support it. The appraiser is going to use only supportable, which means explainable market data to support their opinion of value. Fannie Mae's key matching criteria provide a structured framework for evaluating potential comparable sales. These are the criteria agents should also use when selecting comparable sales. Let's explore each category. Physical similarity encompasses the characteristics that buyers can see and experience. This includes property type, design and style, age and condition, gross living area, room count, and functional utility. When buyers shop for homes, these physical features heavily influence their decisions and willingness to pay. However, physical similarity isn't just about matching numbers on a specification sheet. A 4,000 square foot colonial built in 1985 may share square footage with a 4,000 square foot contemporary built in the same year. But these properties appeal to different buyer segments and may have significantly different values. You must consider the overall appeal and functionality, not just the technical specifications. Legal characteristics represent the bundle of rights associated with the property. This includes different types of ownership, such as a condominium versus single-family ownership, and any restrictions or easements affecting the property's use. These legal differences can significantly impact value, even when properties appear physically similar. A townhouse-style condominium and a detached single-family home might look similar, but the legal structure of ownership creates important distinctions that buyers recognize through their purchase decisions. One owns their land and the other does not. Market appeal addresses how the property is perceived by buyers in the current market. This subjective element is often overlooked, but critically important. A property might be physically similar to your subject, but if it's been rejected by buyers and sat on the market for 6 months before selling at a reduced price, it may not reflect true market value. You want comparable sales that demonstrate market acceptance, not market resistance. Neighborhood considerations complete the matching criteria. Properties must be located in areas that compete for the same buyer pool. This doesn't mean identical neighborhoods, but rather neighborhoods with similar appeal, amenities, and market perception. Buyers typically develop preferences for certain areas based on schools, commute times, amenities, and lifestyle fit. Your comparable sales should come from areas that buyers would seriously consider as alternatives. Using a neighborhood with brand new homes to compare to a neighborhood of older, established homes would not reflect a competing market. Understanding what doesn't qualify as a comparable sale is equally important as knowing what does. Not every transaction represents market value, and including inappropriate sales can undermine your entire analysis. Let's examine the key exclusions and why they matter. Foreclosure sales, short sales, and other distressed transactions require careful evaluation. While recent regulatory changes have made some distressed sales more acceptable as comparables, you must verify that the property was marketed properly and sold at market value. A foreclosure auction where the property sold to the highest bidder after minimal marketing doesn't reflect the same market dynamics as a conventional sale with typical marketing exposure. Sales that include non-realty items can distort value conclusions. If a comparable sale includes furniture, vehicles, or business equipment in the purchase price, you must either exclude that sale or make appropriate adjustments. The challenge lies in determining how much of the total price should be allocated to non-realty items, which often requires additional research or interviews with the parties involved. Properties with unusual characteristics or conditions that don't match your subject should be avoided when better alternatives exist. An extremely outdated property in original condition from 1960 isn't comparable to your updated subject, even if they're in the same neighborhood. The cost and feasibility of updating that property create valuation complexities that weaken your analysis when better comparables are available. It is much more important that you choose appropriate comparable sales, rather than having to determine what an adjustment would be to account for differences. The less adjustments required, the better the comparable sale. Finally, let's think about sales with insufficient data or verification pose problems for credible analysis. If you can't confirm the sale price, date of sale, property characteristics, or terms of sale, that transaction shouldn't be used as a comparable. Your analysis is only as reliable as the data supporting it, and unverified data creates unacceptable risk in your valuation conclusion. Location stands as one of the most important factors in real estate valuation. The old adage that real estate is about location, location, location reflects a fundamental truth. Properties with identical physical characteristics can have vastly different values based solely on their locations. Let's explore why location matters so profoundly and how it should influence your comparable selection. Location determines a property's access to employment centers, quality of schools, availability of amenities, and overall desirability to buyers. These factors create distinct market areas where properties compete with each other for buyers. A home in a highly rated school district commands a premium over an identical home in a lower rated district, regardless of the physical similarities. This price differential reflects buyer preferences and their willingness to pay for location advantages. Properties near busy roads experience noise pollution that many buyers find undesirable. Homes backing to commercial properties may face privacy concerns. Locations in flood zones require additional insurance and create buyer resistance. All these location-specific factors influence value independently of the property's physical characteristics. Your subject and comparable sales should reflect similarities, not differences. The concept of neighborhood boundaries becomes critical in comparable selection. These boundaries aren't always clearly defined by streets or political jurisdictions. Market-defined neighborhoods emerge from buyer behavior and preferences. You must understand how buyers perceive neighborhood boundaries in your market area. Do they distinguish between the east and west sides of a major road? Does proximity to a particular school create a micro-market within the larger area? These nuances require local market knowledge and careful observation of transaction patterns. When selecting comparable sales, always prioritize location similarity. Start your search in the immediate neighborhood of the subject property. If you must expand your search area due to limited sales activity, do so carefully and document your reasoning. Each step away from the subject's immediate location weakens the comparability and requires more careful analysis of location differences. Distance and search radius guidelines provide practical parameters for your comparable search process. Fannie Mae's guidelines suggest starting with sales from the subject's neighborhood and expanding outward as necessary. But what defines a reasonable search radius? The answer depends on several factors, including market activity, property type, and geographic characteristics of the area. In urban and suburban markets with active sales, you can ideally find sufficient comparable sales within a 1-mile radius of the subject property. This proximity ensures location similarity and minimizes the need for location adjustments. However, you must also consider natural boundaries within that radius. A property across a major highway or in a different school district may be farther in market terms than a property slightly beyond your 1-mile radius, but in the same market area. It is important to note that the appraiser is discouraged from using sales which expand over natural or man-made boundaries, as those are typically seen by the underwriter as dissimilar markets. So be careful if you use sales which are not proximate to your subject property. Rural markets present different challenges. When properties are spread across larger geographic areas and sales occur infrequently, you may need to expand your search radius to 5 miles or more. The key question becomes whether properties at this distance compete in the same market. Do buyers shopping for property in your subject's area also consider properties at that distance? Are the locations viewed as substitutable by the market? Concentric search patterns work well as an organizational tool. Start closest to the subject and work outward, documenting sales at each distance increment. This approach demonstrates your methodical search process, and helps underwriters understand why you selected certain comparables over others. If you bypass a nearby sale in favor of a more distant one, document your reasoning clearly and remember, the appraiser may not have the latitude to exclude that sale from their appraisal. Recent sales provide the most reliable market evidence. Generally, focus on sales within the past 6 months in active markets. As sales age, their reliability diminishes because market conditions change over time. If you must use older sales due to limited activity, make sure to analyze market trends and consider time adjustments to account for market appreciation or depreciation. Special location considerations require additional attention and analysis. Certain property types derive significant value from their locations, making location analysis even more critical. Waterfront properties exemplify this principle. The difference between waterfront and non-waterfront properties in the same general area can be substantial, often representing 30 to 50% or more of total value. When pricing waterfront properties, you must find comparable sales with similar water features. A property on a small pond isn't comparable to one on a large lake. Ocean frontage differs from river frontage. Even among similar water bodies, factors like water depth, beach quality, views, and water rights affect value. These location-specific characteristics require careful matching and analysis. These considerations should be the basis for your CMA and pricing your listing. Golf course properties and ski-in, ski-out properties similarly derive special value from their locations. The premium for these locations varies by market, but it's significant enough that you cannot reliably use non-golf course or non-ski properties as comparables. Buyers who seek these specific amenities represent a distinct market segment, and their purchase decisions reflect different priorities than general market buyers. Historic districts present unique challenges. Properties in designated historic districts face restrictions on modifications and renovations that can impact both costs and marketability. Some buyers seek out historic properties for their character and charm, while others avoid them due to the restrictions and maintenance requirements. Your comparable sales should come from the same or similar historic districts to reflect these market dynamics accurately. Identifying the most important features in properties requires understanding what drives buyer decisions in your specific market. While every market has unique preferences, certain features consistently influence value across most residential markets. Let's examine how to prioritize features in your comparable selection process. Square footage stands as a primary consideration for most buyers. However, it's not just about total square footage, but how that space is distributed and utilized. A 3,000 square foot home with 5 bedrooms may appeal to large families, while a 3,000 square foot home with 3 bedrooms and large entertainment spaces attracts different buyers. The functional utility of the space matters as much as the total amount. Quality and condition of construction and finishes significantly impact value. Buyers distinguish between builder-grade finishes and high-end custom finishes. Recent updates increase appeal and value compared to original features from decades ago. When selecting comparable sales, try to match the quality level of your subject property. A home with granite countertops, hardwood floors, and custom cabinetry isn't well compared to one with laminate counters and vinyl flooring, even if the square footages match. So, if a home has 1,000 square feet above grade and 1,000 square feet in a finished basement, it's not a 2,000 square foot house from a valuation standpoint. It's a 1,000 square foot home with a finished basement. That means when you're choosing comps, you should be comparing it to other homes with similar above-grade square footage. In this case, 1,000 square feet. Not homes that are 2,000 square feet above grade. The lot itself deserves careful consideration. Lot size, shape, topography, and landscaping all contribute to property appeal and value. In markets where land is scarce, lot size may be a critical value factor. In other markets, functional utility matters more than raw acreage. A usable level lot of 1 acre might be preferable to a steep, heavily wooded lot of 5 acres, depending on buyer preferences in your market. Garage and parking facilities influence value more than many appraisers recognize. The difference between a 1-car garage, 2-car garage, and 3-car garage can represent thousands of dollars in value. Covered parking versus uncovered parking matters in certain climates. Even the quality and condition of the garage structure affects overall property appeal. Special features like swimming pools, finished basements, or outdoor living spaces require market-specific analysis. In some markets, a pool adds significant value. In others, it's viewed as a maintenance burden that limits the buyer pool. Understand your market. Your comparable selection should reflect how it treats these features. If your subject has a pool, include comparable sales both with and without pools to isolate the pool's contributory value. That is a method of adjustment for differences called paired sales analysis. We will cover more adjustment methods in a coming webinar. When comparable sales are scarce, your selection process becomes more challenging, but no less important. Limited inventory doesn't excuse weak comparable selection. It requires more creative and thorough research strategies. Let's explore effective approaches for these difficult situations. Expanding your time frame represents the most common adjustment for limited markets. If you can't find 3 to 6 sales in the past 6 months, extend your search to 12 months or even longer. However, remember that older sales require market condition adjustments to account for appreciation or depreciation. Document local market trends through sources like MLS statistics, housing price indices, or local economic indicators to support these time adjustments. Geographic expansion requires careful judgment. As discussed earlier, you can widen your search radius, but each increment away from the subject weakens location comparability. Prioritize areas where buyers would realistically consider properties as alternatives to your subject. A rural property might find comparables within a 10-mile radius acceptable, while expanding beyond 1 mile in an urban area might cross important market boundaries. Considering pending sales and active listings can provide additional market evidence, though they don't replace closed sales. Pending sales under contract represent likely market activity, though prices aren't final until closing. Active listings show what sellers are asking, but not what buyers will pay. Use these data points as supporting evidence, not primary comparables, and clearly distinguish them from closed sales in your report. Alternative property types might be considered when absolutely necessary, but only with extensive explanation and adjustment. If pricing a ranch in an area with no ranch sales, you might use a cape or colonial, but have to make significant adjustments for the difference in property style, due to living area size, etc. This approach requires market evidence supporting your adjustments, such as paired sales analysis. We will cover adjustment methods in another webinar. The Comparable Selection Checklist provides a systematic framework for evaluating potential comparable sales. Let's walk through each element to ensure you're conducting thorough, consistent analyses. First, verify the sale is arm's length and reflects market value. Check for relationships between buyer and seller. Review the transaction terms for unusual financing or seller concessions that might affect the price. Confirm the property was marketed appropriately and had typical exposure time. This verification step ensures you're working with reliable market evidence from the start. Second, confirm the sale date falls within an acceptable time frame. Generally, focus on the most recent 6 to 12 months of sales activity. Note the specific sale date, not just the recording date, as these can differ significantly. In your analysis, consider what market conditions existed at that time and whether conditions have changed materially since then. Third, evaluate location comparability thoroughly. Verify the comparable is in the same neighborhood or a highly similar competing neighborhood. Check for similar access to schools, shopping, employment, and amenities. Note any location advantages or disadvantages relative to the subject property that will require adjustment. Fourth, assess physical similarity across all key features. Compare property type, design, age, condition, size, room count, and special features. No comparable will match perfectly, but significant differences require reliable adjustment support. The more similar your comparables, the more confidence your value conclusion commands. Fifth, gather complete and accurate data about each comparable. Verify the sale price, date, property characteristics, and any unusual conditions affecting the sale. Photograph the comparable if possible. Review public records, MLS data, and other sources to ensure accuracy. Incomplete or inaccurate data undermines your entire analysis, so this verification step is critical for credible results. The principle of bracketing provides a powerful technique for establishing credible value ranges. Bracketing means selecting comparable sales both superior and inferior to your subject property in key features, so the subject's value logically falls within the range established by your comparables after adjustments. Think of bracketing as creating guardrails around your value conclusion. If all your comparable sales are superior to your subject, your value conclusion should fall below the comparable sales after adjustments. Conversely, if all comparables are inferior, your value should exceed them. The strongest analyses include a mix, with some comparables above and below the subject in overall appeal and features. In practice, bracketing requires identifying which features most significantly impact value in your market. You might bracket on size by including comparables smaller and larger than your subject. You might bracket on quality by including properties with better and worse finish levels. The goal is to demonstrate through market evidence that your subject's value logically fits within the range your comparables establish. Consider a subject property with 2,500 square feet and updated finishes. Ideal bracketing might include a 2,200 square foot comparable with similar updates, a 2,800 square foot comparable with similar updates, and a 2,500 square foot comparable with original finishes. This selection brackets both size and quality, providing multiple reference points for your value analysis. Bracketing becomes especially important when your subject has unique or superior features. If you're appraising a high-quality custom home, finding comparable sales of equal or superior quality validates your value conclusion. If you can only find inferior sales, you must make upward adjustments, which require particularly strong market support to be credible. The principle also applies to location. Include comparables from the subject's immediate neighborhood if possible, but also consider slightly superior and inferior locations. This approach demonstrates how location influences value and supports any location adjustments you make. As we conclude, let's review the key takeaways from this comprehensive training. First, always follow established guidelines from Fannie Mae and other regulatory bodies, because that is what the appraiser will have to do when it comes time for the appraisal for the mortgage. These standards exist to promote consistency, reliability, and credibility in valuation practice. Second, prioritize location in your comparable selection process. Location drives value more than any other single factor in real estate. Start your search in the immediate vicinity of the subject property and only expand as necessary. Always document your search process and reasoning when using comparables from outside the immediate neighborhood. Third, focus on the features that matter most to buyers in your specific market. Not all features carry equal weight. Through experience and market observation, you'll develop understanding of which features drive buyer decisions and command value premiums in your area. Let this knowledge guide your comparable selection and adjustment decisions. Fourth, use the selection checklist systematically for every appraisal. Consistent application of a structured selection process, improves the quality and reliability of your work. It also provides documentation of your methodology, which serves you well if your analysis is later questioned or reviewed. Fifth, remember that truly comparable sales strengthen your analysis, while weak comparables undermine it. When you face limited data, invest extra effort in thorough research rather than accepting weak comparables out of convenience. Explain market conditions and data limitations openly. Your professional judgment and transparency build trust with clients and users of your appraisals. Choosing comparable sales is a skill you develop over time with every property you work on. The more you understand how to select and analyze your comps, the more confident you'll be in your pricing, and the better prepared you'll be throughout the transaction. You can access more free training inside our membership site at Real Estate Training Hub, that's realestatetraininghub.com. You will find free resources that walk through comparable selection, adjustments, how value is supported in real situations, and so much more. It's completely free to register and access our free resources. Thank you for being here. We'll send you a checklist you can use right away.